The alarm screamed through the bridge of the Soul's Pride as enemy fire tore through its hull. Commander Lee Ji-won gripped her command chair while explosions shook the ship around her. Through the main screen, she could see the massive Coraxian, warships closing in like hungry wolves. "Hull breach on Deck 7, shouted Private Kim Dae-ho from his station. His young face was pale with fear, but his hands stayed steady on the controls. "We're losing atmosphere fast." "How long until we reach the jump point?" Ji-won asked her navigator. Sergeant Park Sora looked up from her console with bad news written across her face. 15 minutes at current speed, but the engines are failing. We might not make it." Ji-won closed her eyes for a moment. The Soul's Pride carried the evacuation data for 3 human colonies. Thousands of families were counting on this information to escape the Coraxian advance. If they failed here, those people would die. There, Sora pointed at her screen. Dead, planted in the next system. No life signs. We could try to hide there. The planet looked gray and lifeless on the scanner. Ancient structures covered its surface like scars. It had been dead for so long that even its name was forgotten. The star charts only called it Kepler 442c. "Do it," Ji-won ordered. "Take us down." The ship shuddered as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Warning lights flashed red across every console. The Soul's Pride was dying around them, but it was carrying them to what might be safety. The landing was more like a controlled crash. The ship scraped across the rocky surface for nearly a kilometer before finally stopping against a massive stone structure. Smoke filled the bridge as the lights went out one by one. "Everyone alive," Ji-won called out in the darkness. "Here," came Dae-ho's voice from somewhere to her left. "Present," Sora answered from near the navigation station. Ji-won activated her emergency light. The beam cut through the smoke to show her 2 crew members were indeed alive, though both looked shaken. The rest of her crew had been lost when the Coraxians first attacked. "We need to check the data core," she said. "Make sure the evacuation information survived." They made their way through the damaged ship. Most of the corridors were blocked by fallen debris, but they found a path to the computer core. The main storage unit was cracked but still glowing with a faint blue light. "It's intact," Dae-ho said with relief. "All the colony data is safe." "Good. Now we need to find a way to send it to Earth Command." But when they tried to contact their fleet, only static came through the radio. The Coraxians had probably jammed all communications in this sector. They were alone on a dead world with information that could save thousands of lives and no way to share it. "We should explore," Sora suggested. "Maybe we can find materials to repair the communications array." Ji-won nodded. They gathered what supplies they could carry and left the broken ship behind. The planet's surface was covered with strange buildings made from black stone. The structures were tall and thin, reaching toward the gray sky like fingers. They had clearly been built by someone, but that someone had been gone for a very long time. "What do you think happened here?" Dae-ho asked as they walked between the ancient towers. "War, probably," Ji-won replied. "Or maybe they just left when their sons started dying." The buildings were empty inside. No furniture, no decorations, no signs that anyone had ever lived here. Just smooth walls and floors covered with symbols that none of them could read. It was like walking through the bones of a civilization. They had been exploring for about an hour when Ji-won noticed something different about one of the larger structures. This building was not black like the others. Instead, it seemed to be made from some kind of crystal that caught what little light came through the clouds. "Look at this," she called to the others. The crystal building was beautiful in a way that made them all stop and stare. Colors moved through its walls like slow lightning. Red, blue, green, and colors that had no names danced beneath the surface. "Should we go inside?" Sora asked. Ji-won studied the entrance. It was just a simple opening in the crystal wall, but something about it made her nervous. Still, they needed to find materials to fix their radio, and this was the most interesting building they had seen. "Stay close," she told the others, "and keep your weapons ready." Inside, the crystal building was even more amazing. The walls glowed with their own light and the floor felt warm beneath their feet. Symbols covered every surface, but these were different from the ones in the stone buildings. These symbols seemed to move and change when nobody was looking directly at them. At the center of the building was a room with a raised platform. On the platform sat something that looked like a chair made from the same crystal as the walls. But it was not really a chair. It was too big, too complex, with parts that curved in ways that hurt to look at. "Don't touch anything," Jiwon warned. But even as she said it, she found herself walking toward the platform. There was something about the crystal chair that called to her. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. She could feel power, sleeping inside it, power that had been waiting for someone to wake it up. "Commander." Daeho's voice seemed to come from very far away. "We should leave." But Jiwon was already reaching toward the crystal surface. Her hand touched the smooth material, and everything changed. Light exploded through the building. The symbols on the walls began to glow and move faster. Deep beneath their feet, something enormous began to wake up. The planet itself seemed to shudder as ancient systems came back to life. "What did you do?" Sora shouted over the growing noise. Jiwon tried to pull her hand away from the crystal, but she could not move. Energy flowed through her like electricity, but it did not hurt. Instead, it felt like the crystal was trying to understand her, to learn what she was. The building around them began to change. Walls became transparent, then disappeared entirely. The crystal chair rose into the air, carrying Jiwon with it. Below them, the dead planet was no longer dead. Lights appeared everywhere as machines that had slept for thousands of years began to work again. The crystal structures across the planet's surface started to glow, and deep in the planet's core, something vast and ancient opened eyes that had been closed since before humans learned to make fire. The Void Render was awake, and it was looking at Lee Jiwon with something that might have been curiosity. The crystal chair slowly lowered Jiwon back to the ground, but the world around her had completely changed. Where there had been empty rooms before, now there were walls of flowing light and surfaces that moved like water. The ancient building was alive, breathing with power that made the air itself hum. "Commander?" Daeho's voice was tight with fear. "What is happening?" Before Jiwon could answer, something spoke. The voice came from everywhere at once, deep and vast like the sound of distant thunder. It did not use words that they could understand, but somehow the meaning appeared directly in their minds. "Small creatures, you have awakened me." Sora raised her weapon, though her hands were shaking badly. "What are you?" The voice paused, as if thinking about how to answer. Around them, the walls showed images of stars and planets, civilizations, rising and falling like waves on a beach. "I am the Void Render. I am the end of threats. I am the silence after the storm." Jiwon felt cold fear creep up her spine. She had heard stories about ancient weapons left behind by dead civilizations, but she had always thought they were just stories. Now she was standing inside one of them. "For 10,000 years I have slept," the Void Render continued. "In that time new species have appeared. New threats have grown. I must examine them. I must decide which ones must end." The images on the walls changed, showing space battles and burning planets. Jiwon saw human ships fighting against Caraxian forces. She saw Earth's blue surface and her daughter's face. "You will be processed first," the weapon said. "Your species will be evaluated." Jiwon knew what that meant. The thing was going to kill them, probably after studying them to learn about all of humanity. Then it would decide whether humans deserved to live or die. From what she could see in the images around them, most species had been judged poorly. She expected to feel panic, but instead she felt strangely calm. Maybe it was because she had already accepted that she might die when the Caraxians attacked her ship. Maybe it was because she was too tired to be afraid anymore. "Wait," she said to the vast presence around them. The Void Render's attention focused on her like a spotlight. She could feel its mind examining her, taking apart her thoughts and memories piece by piece. It was looking for threats, for signs of aggression or danger. "You wish to delay your processing," it said. "This is expected. Most species attempt to negotiate when they face elimination." "I'm not going to negotiate," Jiwon said. "I know you're going to kill us. I know you're probably going to kill all humans everywhere. I just want to tell you about my daughter first." The weapon's attention changed. Where before it had been cold and analytical, now there was something different. Something like surprise. Your offspring. This is relevant to threat assessment. How? Ji-won sat down on the crystal floor. The action felt strange in a place of such power, but she was too tired to keep standing. Daeho and Sora stared at her like she had lost her mind. It's not relevant, she said. I just miss her. Her name is Minji and she's 7 years old. She has this laugh that sounds like music, and she's afraid of the dark, but she won't admit it. When I left on this mission, she gave me a drawing she made of our family. I keep it in my pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. The child's drawing showed stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. One figure wore a blue uniform like Ji-won's. She drew me taller than I really am, Ji-won said with a sad smile. And she made the sun purple because purple is her favorite color. She told me to bring it back safe so she could show her friends at school. The void render was silent. Around them, the flowing images on the walls had stopped moving. Even the humming sound of power had grown quieter. I don't understand, the weapon finally said. You face termination. Why do you speak of irrelevant personal attachments? Because that's what humans do, Ji-won replied. When we're scared or sad or happy, we talk about the people we love. It helps us remember why things matter. Daeho slowly sat down next to his commander. His face was still pale, but he seemed to understand what she was doing. Sora remained standing, her weapon lowered but ready. Your offspring is not present, the void render said. She cannot assist you. She cannot change your fate. This behavior serves no logical purpose. Logic isn't everything, Ji-won said. Minji can't help me now, but thinking about her makes me feel less alone. Even here, even facing you, I can remember her smile and feel like I'm still connected to something good. The weapon's vast mind seemed to turn this idea over and over, like examining a strange artifact. In all its thousands of years, in all the civilizations it had studied, it had never encountered anything quite like this. Show me, it said suddenly. Show you what? This connection, this attachment to absent individuals I wish to understand. The walls around them changed again. Now they showed scenes from Ji-won's memories. Minji taking her first steps, Minji's first day of school, the two of them building a snowman in their backyard on Earth. She was born during the war, Ji-won said, watching her memories play out on the crystal walls. The doctors said it was dangerous to have children while the galaxy was so unstable. But her father and I decided that if we were going to fight for a future, we wanted that future to have someone like her in it. Her father. Another attachment. He died 2 years ago. Caraxian attack on the research station where he worked. He was trying to develop better medical supplies for the colonies. Minji still asks when Daddy's coming home. The void render processed this information with growing confusion. Every species it had encountered before followed predictable patterns. They fought for resources, for territory, for survival. But humans seemed to fight for abstract concepts, for people they might never see again, for ideas that had no physical form. You will die here, the weapon stated. Your offspring will never see you again. Yet you speak of her with what appears to be satisfaction rather than despair. Explain this contradiction. Ji-won wiped tears from her eyes. Because loving her was worth it, even if it ends badly. Because knowing that she exists makes the universe a better place, even if I never see her again. Because some things are more important than whether they last forever. For the first time in 10,000 years, the void render found itself genuinely puzzled. It had been designed to identify and eliminate threats to galactic stability. But how could it evaluate a species that seemed to find strength in vulnerability, that chose love over logic, that talked about absent children while facing death? This requires further study, it announced. Your processing is delayed. And for the first time since awakening, the galaxy's deadliest weapon found itself genuinely curious about what a human might say next. Hours passed in the crystal chamber. The void render had grown silent, its vast mind working through concepts it had never encountered before. Ji-won sat quietly on the floor, still holding her daughter's drawing. Daeho and Sora had found places, to rest against the glowing walls, though neither of them could sleep. Finally, the weapon spoke again. I have analyzed 847 different civilizations, it said. All followed predictable patterns. They grew, they consumed, they expanded until they became threats to galactic stability. Then I eliminated them. But your species confuses my calculations. How? So? G1 asked. You are weak. Your bodies break easily. Your lifespans are brief. Your technology is primitive compared to most species I have encountered. Yet you survived a galactic war against the Coraxians, who are superior to you in every measurable way. This should be impossible. G1 thought about that. Maybe we survived because we're weak. Explain. When you're weak, you have to be clever. When you can't win by fighting, you have to find other ways. When you know you might die, you make sure your life means something. The walls around them began showing new images. Battle scenes from the war against the Coraxians, but not the kind G1 expected. Instead of massive space battles, she saw small human ships evacuating civilians. She saw doctors treating wounded enemies. She saw soldiers sharing their food with refugees from other species. Tell me about Dr. Choi Minho, the Void Render said suddenly. Ji-won was surprised. You know about him? I have accessed your species' historical records, but I wish to understand why he is considered important. Minho invented faster-than-light travel for humans, Ji-won said, but not for the usual reasons. Most species develop FTL to explore and conquer. Minho created it because Earth was getting overcrowded, and he wanted to find new homes for people who had nowhere else to go. The images on the wall showed a thin man in a laboratory, working late into the night. His notes were covered with equations, but also with pictures drawn by children, letters from families asking for help. He could have made himself rich and powerful, Ji-won continued. The military wanted to use his discovery to build better warships. Corporations wanted to use it to claim new worlds for mining. But Minho gave the technology away for free. He said the stars belonged to everyone, not just the strong. This was inefficient, the Void Render observed. Maybe. But it meant that when the Coraxians attacked, humans were already spread across 100 different worlds. They couldn't destroy us all at once because we were everywhere, helping each other survive. The weapon processed this information. Show me Captain Yoon Hana. More images appeared. A woman in a military uniform, standing on the bridge of a warship. But the ship was not firing weapons. Instead, it was positioned between a Coraxian fleet and a transport full of civilians. Hana commanded the defense of the Kepler colony, Ji-won said. 3,000 families were trying to evacuate when the Coraxians arrived. Her ship, the Busan, was the only military vessel in the system. The images showed the Busan fighting desperately against 5 enemy warships. It was clearly outgunned and outmatched. She could have retreated, Ji-won said. Standard military doctrine said she should have saved her ship and crew for future battles. But Hana stayed. She kept fighting until every civilian transport had escaped. Her ship was destroyed, the Void Render stated. Yes. Everyone aboard died, including Hana. But 3,000 families lived because of her sacrifice. And the children from those families grew up to become soldiers, doctors, engineers, teachers. They had children of their own. Hana's sacrifice saved thousands of lives that hadn't even been born yet. Yet she gained nothing from this action. She gained something that can't be measured, Ji-won said. She gained the knowledge that her life had meaning, that she had chosen to be the kind of person she wanted to be even when it cost her everything. The Void Render fell silent again. Around them, the images continued to change, showing more scenes from human history. Not the grand battles or great inventions that usually impressed alien observers, but smaller moments. A teacher staying late to help a struggling student. A farmer sharing his harvest with hungry neighbors. A mother singing her child to sleep during an air raid. I do not understand, the weapon finally admitted. These actions serve no strategic purpose. They do not increase your species' power or resources. They do not help you defeat your enemies, yet you consider them important. Why? Because they Make us who we are, Jiwan said. Power and resources don't last forever. Enemies can be defeated or become friends. But the choice to be kind, to be brave, to care about others, that's something that stays with you no matter what happens. Even when facing extinction? Especially then. When everything else is taken away, the kind of person you choose to be is the only thing left that really belongs to you. Daeho shifted position against the wall. Commander, he said quietly. What about Engineer Oh Hyun from the colony ships? Jiwon smiled, remembering. Hyun was in charge of life support systems on the generation ships. Not exciting work, but absolutely critical. He spent 40 years making sure that air recyclers worked properly and water filters stayed clean. The images showed a middle-aged man crawling through maintenance tunnels, checking equipment that no one else wanted to think about. When pirates attacked the new Seoul colony ship, they damaged the primary life support system, Jiwon continued. Hyun could have evacuated with everyone else. Instead, he stayed behind to manually operate the backup systems. He kept 20,000 people alive for 3 days until rescue arrived. He survived? The Void Render asked. Yes, but just barely. The radiation exposure cost him his health. He spent his last years teaching other engineers how to maintain the systems he had perfected. He said someone had to know, in case it happened again. Another sacrifice for uncertain future benefit. That's what humans do. Sora spoke up from her position by the wall. We plant trees we'll never sit under. We build things for people we'll never meet. We tell stories so that others can learn from our mistakes. The Void Render absorbed this information, adding it to the growing collection of human behaviors that defied its understanding. These creatures acted as if they believed their species would continue forever, even while knowing that individuals died. They invested in futures they would never see. Your species is inefficient, it concluded. You waste resources on individuals who cannot contribute to your survival. You risk your lives for abstract concepts. You make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. That's right, Jiwon agreed. Yet you survived when stronger species did not. Also right. This should not be possible according to all evolutionary models I have studied. Jiwon stood up and walked closer to the center of the room, where the weapon's attention seemed to be focused. Maybe survival isn't just about being the strongest or the smartest. Maybe it's about being the kind of species that others want to help survive. The Void Render considered this. Around them, the images began showing scenes of other species working alongside humans. Alien doctors in human hospitals. Human engineers, helping to repair damaged alien ships. Children of different species playing together in refugee camps. You form alliances, the weapon observed. We form friendships, Jiwon corrected. There's a difference. Alliances are about mutual benefit. Friendships are about caring what happens to someone even when they can't help you back. For the first time since awakening, the Void Render found itself examining not just the tactical capabilities of a species, but their capacity for something it had no name for. Something that made other species want to fight alongside them instead of against them. Tell me more, it said, and Jiwon smiled, because she had more stories than they could share in a lifetime. The walls of the crystal chamber suddenly flashed red. Warning signals filled the air as the Void Render's attention shifted away from Jiwon and her stories. Around them, the flowing images changed to show space above the planet. Ships are approaching, the weapon announced. Caraxian battle fleet, 12 vessels of war configuration. Jiwon felt her heart sink. The enemy had followed them here. She looked at Daeho and Sora, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. They had finally found something that might understand humanity, and now their time was running out. They come for you, the Void Render observed. To complete your destruction. Through the transparent walls, they could see the Caraxian ships descending through the planet's atmosphere. The vessels were massive and dark, built for war and nothing else. Their hulls were covered with weapons that could turn entire cities to ash. Commander, Sora said quietly, we should try to hide. But Jiwon knew it was too late for hiding. The Caraxians had sensors that could detect a single human heartbeat from orbit. They would be found within minutes. No, she said. We stay here. The largest Caraxian ship landed near the crystal structures. Through the glowing walls, they could see armored soldiers marching toward their location. At the front of the group was a figure that G1 recognized from intelligence reports. Fleet Admiral Kethmore, she whispered. The Caraxian leader was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black stones. He wore armor that seemed to absorb light, making him look like a shadow given form. Behind him walked 50 soldiers, all carrying weapons designed to kill humans efficiently. Interesting, the Void Render said. I will observe these newcomers. They're not here to talk, G1 warned. Caraxians don't negotiate. They don't show mercy. They just destroy everything that isn't like them. But the weapon was already extending its consciousness toward the approaching army. G1 felt the moment when the Void Render's attention touched Kethmore's mind, and she heard the weapon's reaction like a sharp intake of breath. This one is different from you, it said. The Caraxian soldiers entered the crystal building without hesitation. Their weapons were raised and ready to fire. Admiral Kethmore walked in the center of the group, his cold eyes scanning the glowing walls with disgust. Humans, he said in accented English. Still alive, I see. That will be corrected shortly. Admiral Kethmore, G1 replied, standing to face him. You've come a long way to kill 3 people. Not just 3 people, Kethmore said with a cruel smile. You carry the evacuation data for the outer colonies. With that information, we can find every human hiding place in this sector. We can finish what we started. You're too late, Daiho said bravely. We already transmitted the data. Kethmore laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Impossible. We monitored all communications. No signal left this world. He gestured to the crystal walls around them, though I admit I did not expect to find you consorting with ancient technology. The Void Render had been listening to this exchange with growing interest. Now it focused its attention fully on the Caraxian admiral, reading his memories and intentions with the same thoroughness it had used on G1. What it found disturbed it deeply. Show me the Caraxian Empire, the weapon commanded, though only G1 and her crew could hear its voice. The walls around them began displaying images from Kethmore's memories. Worlds burning under Caraxian bombardment, cities being torn down and rebuilt in identical patterns, children being separated from their families and raised in government schools where they learned to forget their original languages and customs. You destroy cultures, the Void Render observed. We bring order, Kethmore replied, apparently able to hear the weapon now. We eliminate the chaos of diversity. All species under Caraxian rule live in harmony because all species become Caraxian. More. Images flashed across the walls, libraries being burned, art being destroyed, old people being killed because they remembered songs and stories from before the conquest. The Caraxians did not just defeat their enemies, they erased them completely. The Solani had beautiful music, G1 said, recognizing some of the scenes. I heard recordings once. They could make sounds that human ears couldn't even detect properly. Useless noise, Kethmore said dismissively. We eliminated such distractions. Now former Zilani worlds are productive and efficient. The Thektar had fascinating architecture, Sora added. Buildings that grew like plants, changing with the seasons. Inefficient structures, the Admiral replied. We replaced them with proper construction, standard design, easy to maintain. The Void Render processed these memories with growing anger. It had been designed to eliminate threats to galactic stability, but the Caraxians represented something worse than chaos. They represented the death of everything that made civilizations worth preserving. You erase history, the weapon said, its voice now audible to everyone in the chamber. Kethmore smiled coldly. History is the source of all conflict. Different. Peoples remember different things, claim different truths. We solve this by giving everyone the same history, the history of Caraxian victory. What about their stories? G1 asked. What about the things that made them who they were? Stories are lies told by the weak to make themselves feel important, Kethmore replied. We replace lies with truth. the truth that strength matters more than sentiment. The admiral turned to his soldiers. Kill the humans carefully. We need the data core from their ship intact. But before the soldiers could raise their weapons, the crystal chamber began to shake. Power flowed through the walls like lightning, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. Wait, the Void Render commanded, and its voice carried such authority that even the Caraxian soldiers hesitated. The weapon had made its decision. In 10,000 years, it said, I have eliminated threats to galactic peace. Species that consumed resources without limit. Civilizations that spread war and destruction. But I have never encountered a threat like yours. We bring order, Kethmore insisted. We are the solution to galactic chaos. You are the destroyer of everything that makes existence meaningful, the Void Render replied. You do not conquer civilizations. You murder them and wear their corpses as disguises. You are the opposite of everything I was created to protect. The crystal walls began to glow brighter. Outside, similar structures across the planet were awakening, their power systems coming online after millennia of sleep. The humans told me stories, the weapon continued. Stories of sacrifice and love of individuals who chose to be better than they had to be. Stories of cultures that created beauty and meaning from chaos and suffering. You would destroy all of that. Kethmore raised his own weapon, a sleek device that could cut through starship armor. Ancient machine, you will not interfere with Caraxian destiny. I am not interfering, the Void Render said calmly. I am fulfilling my purpose. The chamber filled with blinding light. When it faded, Admiral Kethmore and his soldiers were gone. Not dead, but simply elsewhere. The weapon had transported them back to their ships with a casual display of power that made their most advanced technology look like children's toys. Where did you send them? Jiwan asked. Home, the Void Render replied. With a message. The Caraxian Empire will cease its expansion immediately, or it will face the consequences of awakening me. Through the crystal walls, they could see the Caraxian ships retreating hastily toward space, but Jiwan knew this was not over. Kethmore would not give up easily, and he would return with more ships, more weapons. They'll be back, she said. Yes, the weapon agreed. But next time, I will be ready for them. The Void Render had chosen its side. After listening to human stories for hours, it had decided that some things were worth protecting. Some civilizations deserved to survive not because they were strong, but because they made the galaxy a more interesting place. Thank you, Jiwan said simply. Do not thank me yet, the weapon replied. This conflict is far from over, and I will need more stories if I am to understand how to protect what matters most. Jiwan smiled and sat back down on the crystal floor. She had plenty more stories to tell. 3 days passed before the Caraxian fleet returned. This time they brought reinforcements. Hundreds of warships filled the space around the dead planet, their weapons pointed toward the crystal structures below. Admiral Kethmore had convinced his superiors that the ancient weapon posed a threat to the entire empire. Inside the crystal chamber, Jiwan continued to share stories with the Void Render. She had told it about human art, human music, human dreams of peace among the stars. The weapon listened to everything with growing fascination, asking questions that showed it was beginning to understand concepts it had never encountered before. They have returned, the weapon announced as the first Caraxian ships entered the atmosphere. How many? Sora asked. 800 vessels. They bring planet-killing weapons. They intend to destroy this world completely rather than risk my interference again. Jiwan felt a chill of fear. The Caraxians were willing to sacrifice an entire planet just to eliminate 3 humans and their alien ally. It showed how desperate they were becoming. Can you stop them? Deho asked. Deho. Yes, the Void Render replied without hesitation. My capabilities exceed theirs by several orders of magnitude. I can eliminate their fleet entirely within moments. The chamber's walls showed the approaching armada, massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets in half. Carrier ships launching thousands of fighters, weapons charging with enough power to boil oceans. But there is a price, the weapon continued. Jiwan had been expecting this. Ancient powers never acted without cost. What do you want? Not what I want. What I need. You must remain here, Li Jiwan. You must continue to share your stories. I require a permanent human presence to help me understand your species and others like them. The request hit Jiwan like a physical blow. Stay here forever in this crystal tomb on a dead world. Never see Earth again. Never hold her daughter again. For how long? She asked quietly. Unknown. Perhaps years, perhaps centuries. I am immortal, but my understanding of mortal perspectives is limited. I need someone to help me learn the difference between civilizations worth protecting and threats worth eliminating. Sora stepped forward angrily. That's not fair. She's already given you everything. Fairness is not relevant, the Void Render replied. This is necessity. Without guidance, I might make errors. I might destroy species that deserve protection, or protect species that deserve destruction. The responsibility is too great for my judgment alone. Jiwan closed her eyes and thought of Minji. Her daughter would grow up without her mother, would probably forget what her voice sounded like, would have to learn about the galaxy and its wonders from books instead of bedtime stories. But she also thought about all the other children, human children on the colony worlds, alien children whose parents remembered their own cultures and languages, children who would never be born if the Coraxians continued their expansion. If I stay, she said finally, what happens to them? She pointed toward the approaching fleet. I will demonstrate why awakening me was unwise, the weapon said. The crystal structures across the planet began to glow with building power. Deep underground, systems that had slept for millennia roared to life. The very air around them started to hum with energy that made their teeth ache. Wait, Jiwan said. Don't destroy them. Send them back again. They will only return with more ships. Then keep sending them back. Eventually they'll understand. The Void Render paused, considering this. You wish me to show mercy to those who would eliminate your species entirely. I wish you to give them a chance to choose differently. That's what humans do. We keep hoping that people can be better than they are, even when they repeatedly demonstrate otherwise. Especially then. The weapon fell silent for a long moment. Outside, the Coraxian fleet had formed attack formations and was preparing to fire. Kethmore's voice echoed across all communication frequencies, demanding the immediate surrender of the humans and the deactivation of the ancient weapon. Very well, the Void Render said finally. I will try your approach. What happened next would become legend across the galaxy. The crystal structures on the planet's surface erupted with light that could be seen from space. That light reached out like gentle hands and simply pushed the entire Coraxian fleet away from the planet. Not destroyed, not damaged, just moved. 800 warships found themselves suddenly drifting in empty space several star systems away. Along with the displacement came a message, transmitted directly into every Coraxian mind simultaneously. The message was simple. The Coraxian Empire would cease its expansion immediately. It would stop destroying other cultures and allow conquered species to rebuild their lost traditions. In return, the Void Render would remain dormant. Any attempt to continue the Empire's campaign of cultural destruction would result in the complete elimination of Coraxian civilization. The message was delivered not in words but in images and feelings that no language could properly express. Every Coraxian in the fleet suddenly understood what their empire had truly been doing. They felt the grief of parents whose children had been taken away. They experienced the despair of artists whose life's work had been burned. They knew the terror of elderly people who had been killed for remembering forbidden songs. Many of the Coraxian soldiers began to weep. Some resigned their commissions immediately. Admiral Kethmore himself stared at his reflection in a monitor and wondered what kind of monster he had become. It is done, the Void Render announced. The immediate threat is ended. But Jiwan knew her part of the bargain was just beginning. She looked at Deho and Sora, both of whom were staring at her with understanding and sadness. Take the evacuation. Tata back to Earth, she told them. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that someone stayed behind to make sure the galaxy remembers the value of stories. Commander, Deho said with tears in his eyes, we can't just leave you here. You're not leaving me, Jiwan replied with a sad smile. You're carrying my story with you. Every time someone tells it, I'll be there too. The Void Render created a small transport vessel for the two humans, equipped with everything they would need to reach friendly space. As they prepared to leave, Zora turned back one last time. What about your daughter? She asked. What should we tell Minji? Jiwan thought carefully before answering. Tell her that Mommy found the most important job in the galaxy. Tell her that someone has to make sure the good stories don't get lost. And tell her that every night, when she looks up at the stars, I'm up there somewhere listening to new stories and learning about all the wonderful things that make life worth living. As the transport lifted off, carrying Daiho and Sora toward home, Jiwan sat back down in the crystal chamber. The Void Render's attention focused on her with something that felt almost like gratitude. Are you prepared for this responsibility? It asked. No, Jiwan answered honestly. But I'm willing to learn, and I have a lot more stories to tell you. Then let us begin, the weapon said. Tell me about the time humans first learned to sing. And as Jiwan began another story, the crystal wall showed images of children across the galaxy playing safely in streets where they could speak their own languages and draw pictures in any colors they chose. The universe was a little bit safer because someone had chosen to stay behind and remind an ancient weapon that some things were worth preserving. Years later, when Captain An Junghyun led the first diplomatic mission to the former Caraxian worlds, he would find civilizations rebuilding their lost cultures with joy and determination. He would see libraries being rebuilt, traditional arts being taught to children, and former enemies working together to preserve the stories that made them unique. And deep in space, on a crystal world where time moved differently, Lee Jiwan would still be sharing stories with the galaxy's most powerful guardian, ensuring that the universe remembered why diversity was beautiful and why every culture's story deserved to be heard. The war was over, the galaxy was safe, and it had all started with a mother who missed her daughter and decided to tell a weapon about love.